I can't see you.
He said he's ready.
Okay.
Sorry, thumbs up, sorry, my bad.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our next cooking class. Today, we're doing fall and winter seasonal vegetables. My name is Kim Guess, and I'm a dietitian with Be Well at Work Wellness Program. And I've done the same class every year for the past several years, and there's usually like kind of a different sub theme to it. So this year it's kind of like simpler dishes that are really featuring the vegetables and fruit. Last year we also did simpler dishes. In 2023 we did what I called like showstopper stuffed vegetables. So if you want something that's a little more what would I call it? Like impressive for your holiday table, then we have those recipes. And we also did some other kind of holiday themed fall vegetables in 2022 with a whole roasted cauliflower and mushroom Wellington. So if you want to try other fall veggies, we have tons and tons of recipes on our website. I'll also point out on the TV, it says mute, but don't worry about it. People on Zoom can still hear, so. All right, let's get started. Oh. Okay, so we are making 3 recipes today. There's kind of a bonus one since they're all a little bit on the simpler side. So we're gonna make a sweet potato, kale, and quinoa salad. And I've got the quinoa already cooking here. It's simmering. It simmers for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm also gonna cook some sweet potato and kale to go in it. So this recipe is just kind of a unique salad that you can eat warm or hot, that has the deep orange and green colors, which means there's a lot of nutrients in there. And then it also has quinoa, which provides some extra fiber and protein. And I used a tricolor quinoa for this. So if you can see on the overhead view, it's simmering there. You can use whatever color quinoa you want. This is actually a recipe that I made when I worked as a cook right after college, and we used red quinoa, which I never had before, and it kind of has a nutty flavor, a little bit of a crunchier texture. So if you like that, you can use it. I personally like the 3 different colors because then you get more of a variety of texture. But if you can only find, say, white quinoa, then that works too. So one thing about quinoa when you cook it is you want to rinse it ahead because it has kind of a bitter flavor, so that helps wash it away. And what I would do is measure the quinoa. I use 1 cup here, and then rinsed it really well, and then poured it out into a fine mesh sieve like this. Because if you use a big colander, it will just fall through all the holes. So that way you can get it all out and put it back in, add the 2 cups of water, bring it to a boil. And then once it boils, bring it down to a simmer and let it cook for 10 minutes or so. I think it says 15 on here because that's for red quinoa. So maybe just check it. You know, it's looking pretty well cooked, but I can tell it's still a little bit opaque in the middle. So this needs a few more minutes, probably another 3 or 4 minutes. Once it's boiling. And then we'll just let it stand for 10 minutes with the lid on afterwards, and then fluff it with a fork and it'll be done. Okay. So the next thing is we're going to prepare the sweet potato and the kale. So I'm going to use two medium sweet potatoes. I've already cut and peeled one of them just to save time. And I partially peeled this one. And you can leave the skin on if you want. It does have a little bit extra fiber and nutrition, but honestly, the sweet potato is so nutritious that you're still going to get a lot of nutrients if you don't prefer the skin, which is my personal preference. Oh, I'm going to put on gloves just to make this a little easier. And then we're just going to cut it into little bite-sized pieces so that it will roast evenly. So, you know, sweet potatoes are round, so they're going to roll around when you cut it. which makes it a little bit riskier. So what I like to do sometimes is just cut off one side and then flip it. So now you have a flat side to cut on, so it won't, so it'll be a little safer to cut. Okay, so I'm just gonna cut all of these into little strips. And then into little bite-sized pieces. Okay. And then we're gonna roast this. So you can just throw it on the pan and drizzle with the oil and roast it like that. But if you can, you can toss it in a bowl and toss it with the oil. And if you're gonna season this is for any roasted vegetable. If you're gonna add seasoning and you toss in a bowl first, it's just gonna help everything be a little bit better coated. Okay. I'm gonna use about a tablespoon of olive oil. And it doesn't have to be exact. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. And if you want, you can season it here, add a little salt, but we also have some salt or sodium in the dressing in the form of soy sauce. So, I like to just kind of wait a little longer and then add salt as needed. Okay, so if you come to any of these classes before, I always talk about roasting vegetables because I do it often. It's one of my favorite ways to cook vegetables. But a few recommendations to make sure that you get nicely browned pieces that aren't mushy is that you want everything to be really spread out. If you crowd the pan, the vegetables will release the water and they will steam the other pieces, and then it won't be able to get crisp. So that's especially important for something that has a lot of water in it, like zucchini. Sweet potato doesn't have as much water, but you still want that nice texture. And actually the surface that you cook it on matters too. So it will actually get the most brown if you cook it directly on the metal pan, because the metal conducts heat really well, and that will lead to the browning on the surface. But sweet potato can be a little sticky. If you're not sure if the vegetables will stick too much, then you can always line it with silicone baking mat, which I like to use because it's reusable. You can use parchment paper or foil. And if you want it to be a little browner, then foil will work better than the silicone mat or parchment paper. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for and what you have at home. Okay, so then we'll bake that for 20-25 minutes. 20-25. And I think the quinoa should be about done. So it'll be done when the water is absorbed and there is still a little water in here, so I'm gonna cook it a little bit longer. And it shouldn't have that little opaque dot in the center. That's kind of how you know, but I had it on pretty low, so I'm gonna let it cook a little bit longer while we get everything else ready. So the other big component of the salad is gonna be the kale. And we're gonna cook it to get it tender. You can eat it raw, of course, if you prefer, but it is pretty chewy. So I would say if you want to add raw kale, you can massage it, actually. Often when salad is served, or kale is served in a salad, it's massaged to help kind of break down the toughness. But I like to just saute it a little bit for this recipe. So we have one bunch of kale and I already washed it. And we got to get the stem off. So the easiest way is just to pull it out like this. You don't have to cut it or anything. It's really quick and easy. And you could use other greens in this recipe if you want, but I like to use kind of a hearty green. And let me see what's here. Okay. So let's talk about it because this theme is fall and winter vegetables. So, whoops, caught it just in time. Okay, so kale is it's a cool weather vegetable, so it's in season in fall and spring. and it can be harvested into the winter. And frost can actually improve the flavor, which is true for a lot of these hardy greens. And when you are buying it, you want to look for green leaves that are crisp and dark green. So we don't want them to be too yellowed or anything, or soggy or kind of limp. And you can store it in the fridge, unwashed in a plastic bag for up to a week or so. Okay, so I just want this to also be bite-sized, so I'm just gonna kind of roll it up and cut it all into smaller pieces so we can saute it. All right, and it's gonna cook down quite a bit, so it'll be a little easier to eat. Okay, and then the sweet potato, which we already prepared, is also in season in the fall from about August to December, although pretty much all these vegetables you can find year round in the grocery store. But you know, if you go to the farmer's market, that's when you're gonna find them the freshest and most locally grown. So that kind of helps you learn like what's in season throughout the year. Sweet potato, when you buy it, you want to look for firm and smooth skin without bruises or soft spots. And when you store it in a cool, dry, dark place that's well ventilated. Don't store it in the fridge actually, because the middle gets hard and affects the flavor. And as I mentioned with the dark orange, we're getting a lot of nutrients. So it's an excellent source of vitamin A. Also has vitamin C, potassium, and fiber. And the orange color means it's rich in carotenoids. So you'll also see similar nutrients in like carrots and other orange vegetables. And the kale is also very deeply colored, which means there's a lot of nutrition here. So we also have a lot of vitamin A and C and K, as well as fiber and calcium. Okay, so let's check on our quinoa now. Okay, the water is pretty much absorbed and I don't see any opaque pieces in it. So I'll try to hold it up so you can see. I'm steaming up the camera. Okay, that looks good. So we're gonna set it aside in the bowl. Gonna plop it out. And I actually wanna heat up some water in this pan. So I'm gonna scoop as much out as I can. Okay, so let's let that cool off. Okay. So next what we're gonna do is saute the kale for the salad. So we're gonna put it in a pan with the remaining olive oil, which is about a tablespoon. And oh, just to mention the quinoa, it has about 8 grams of protein per cup and 5 grams of fiber per cup. Nutritionally, the colors are similar, whether it's white or red. There's also, I don't know what it's called, maybe black quinoa that's a little crunchier in there. So nutritionally they're similar, but like I mentioned earlier, the red is going to be a little chewier and nuttier. So you can use whatever flavor or texture you prefer. Okay, and then while the kale is cooking, we're gonna make a really simple dressing for this recipe. Okay. So it's just 1 part of each liquid, 1.5 tablespoons of rice vinegar, soy sauce or tamari, and sesame oil. And I was trying to use things up, so I used up all the tamari. So let's just pretend I'm adding 1.5 tablespoons there. And then we'll add, okay, and then we'll add 1.5 tablespoons of the rice vinegar. And you can also adjust the dressing to your taste. If you want it to be a little tangier, you can just add a little extra vinegar. If you want that toasty flavor, we're using toasted sesame oil rather than like refined sesame oil that's more often used for cooking. Toasted is used more as like a dressing or kind of the finishing oil on a dish because it has a low smoke point because it's toasted, but it also has that really rich flavor that is great for things like dressing. Okay, let's add our kale here. These bunches were pretty big and I don't want to make a mess, so I'm just going to leave a little bit uncooked there. But we're just going to cook this until it's tender and dark green. That'll make it a little easier to chew. Okay, so then we add 1.5 tablespoons of the toasted sesame oil. And you can use soy sauce or you can use tamari, which is like soy sauce, but usually doesn't have wheat in it. So if you or somebody you're making it for has a wheat allergy or gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, then you can look for a tamari or soy sauce that is gluten-free. And they also come in varying amounts of sodium. So I find personally, I like the taste of a reduced sodium tamari better than the reduced sodium soy sauce, but that's my personal preference. You can use whatever you want. But if you use something that is less salty and you find that, or less sodium and you find that it needs a little more salt, then you can just add a little more at the end. It gives you a little more control when you use the reduced sodium soy sauce or tamari. So you can only add the salt if needed. Okay, so that's starting to turn green. Probably just needs a few more minutes. And I'll just set that aside. So you won't see the completed salad because I can't roast the sweet potato right here, but you can hopefully see it on your plate and get an idea of how it should look. But again, it's a salad, so you don't have to follow the exact quantities or ingredients. If you wanted to use like a different root vegetable in there, you could do that. Or if you wanted to like half the amount of kale or double it, you can do that too. You just might need a little more dressing if you increase the quantity of any of the main ingredients.
You put oil in the cow or just steam?
I put a little bit of olive oil in there. Yeah, so you could also steam it if you wanted. Like you could put, maybe you could even put a little water in the bottom and then just put a lid on it. So you can cook it that way if you prefer. But this will give it a little bit more of a crisp texture, which I kind of like. Yeah, you can customize it. Okay, so that's almost done. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn that off for now and work on the other recipes. So the next one we're gonna do is the maple glazed breakfast squash. So you don't have to eat this for breakfast, but I just wanted to give you an idea of something that you can do that's really different. And it's kind of like I guess you can compare it to a fruit parfait, but we're using pumpkin instead of fruit. So you can serve it with whatever you want. I served it with yogurt that is vegan, and I put some granola on top. But you can also put dried fruit, you can put a little extra maple syrup, extra cinnamon, whatever, however you'd like to serve it. And you can have it warm or cold. Okay. So I'm going to use kabocha squash, which is one of my favorite types of winter squash. You can use any other type of winter squash you want, like butternut, honey nut, acorn. They're all kind of similar in the way that you would cook it. But one cool thing about kabocha is that you can eat the skin. You don't have to if you don't like it, but once it's cooked, it's tender enough. Okay. Let's just set this aside. I'm just gonna pile things up here like that. And the extra kale. Okay. Okay. So a lot of winter squash are hard to cut. But because they have this thick skin, they keep for a long time. So a lot of winter squash will keep for like at least a month at room temperature if stored properly. So I'll tell you what I did to make it a little easier, but just real quick about winter squash like kabocha. They're usually harvested in late summer or early fall. But the flavor actually improves with storage. So they have peak ripeness and sweetness from about October through the winter months. So when you're buying it, you want to look for one that's heavy for its size, and the skin should be hard, thick, and dark green with a dull finish. Avoid it if you want to avoid shiny skin, because that actually might mean underripe. And then if the stem is dry and corky, usually that means it's mature. If it's soft or rotten, that's probably not a good thing. But this is going to look a little bit different because what I did was I popped this in the microwave for 5 minutes. So I just poked it all over with a fork and microwaved it for 5 minutes to make it easier to cut. So I basically like started cooking it a little bit, and it's just going to be a lot easier to handle. See if I can move this. That's not too hot. You can also do this in the oven. It's just going to take longer, probably like 20 minutes to soften it the same amount you could get in the microwave in about 5 minutes. So what we're going to do is cut it into 1-inch wedges. So you'll see that the knife is going in. There's definitely some resistance, but this is a lot easier than if the pumpkin was totally raw. I find that it also makes the insides a little bit easier to scoop out.
Do you do that with all squash?
I think any winter squash would work okay, yeah. Move the extra tail. A little compost bowl. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the inside. You can see it's nice, pretty deep orange color, which also means there's lots of nutrients in there. But that pretty much goes for all winter squash. Scoop those out. You can see that it comes out a little more easily. Everything's a little softer and not as tough. Okay. All right. And then we're just gonna cut this into 1-inch wedges. If you cut it thicker, just know it's gonna take a lot longer to cook. So I like to keep them fairly small. And to make it easier, I'm just putting the cut side right down on the cutting board, so it doesn't roll around. And then we have the stem there on top, so that's kind of tough to cut through, so I might just kind of cut it off and get it out of the way. Okay. That's 1/2. Okay. Then we're going to prepare a baking sheet. Again, you can roast it directly on the metal, which will get a little bit browner, but it can stick, especially because we're going to be putting sugar on there, which helps with the browning, but gets really sticky, right? So in this case, I like to use the lining just to make it a little bit easier to take off at the end. And what I'm gonna do for the coating is, like I said with the sweet potato, you can just throw it on the pan and toss everything on there and then roast it like that. But I don't recommend doing that in this case, because if you get a lot of the extra maple syrup pooling around, it's just gonna burn. Because we're cooking at a very high temperature, because what we want is a little bit of that crisp edge, which you may not have had in your samples because I think our oven doesn't get quite as hot. But that's a nice texture that I try to get. So we need maple syrup, and I used most of it. So again, I'm trying to use up what we have, but you can use any liquid sweetener, but the maple is kind of a nice flavor, especially for going for the fall flavors. But we need 2 tablespoons. of maple syrup. So I'm just gonna measure it into a bowl so we can combine it and then brush it on to the pumpkin. So I had about half a tablespoon of maple, so I'm just gonna fill in the rest with agave since this is just for show. Then we're also gonna add 2 tablespoons of oil, which will hopefully help prevent it from sticking and will help with the browning. Okay, 2 tablespoons of oil, and I'm just using any neutral flavored oil. This is canola. You can use another oil if you'd like safflower, or sunflower, or avocado. Let's see, and then we're gonna add the spices that I already measured here, so I'll show on the camera. We just have some salt, half a teaspoon, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and a pinch of nutmeg, and a pinch of allspice. The allspice and the nutmeg are both optional, but it'll add to that kind of fall vibe we're going for here. I'm just gonna stir it up with the measuring spoon. So you can see when we combine it, it's gonna create like a nice thick coating for the pumpkin. Okay. Let me rearrange here. I'm also gonna need some hot water for the next recipe, so I'm just gonna get that going real quick. Okay. So now we can just kind of dunk each one and let the excess drip off, because again, it's gonna pool and it will, it might burn and create a lot of smoke. So to avoid that, we wanna just get a light coating on everything. The way I cut this one is kind of funny looking. You can make kind of nicer looking wedges if you want, but yeah, they're good luck horseshoes.
Rename it.
So I'll just stick these in the sides. That. So yeah, you can have this for dessert or a side with dinner if you want, but I just wanted to show kind of different type of breakfast to do. And start the day with some vegetables.
And what kind of vegan, yogurt is that?
The kind that I used, in case you like it, is this one. It was Cocoa June, unsweetened vanilla. Since I bought unsweetened since there's maple syrup on the pumpkin, and then there's also sugar in the granola.
Sweet.
What's that?
It was sweet.
It was sweet enough? Okay, okay, good. Yeah, so I would recommend just kind of like a plain one or a plain vanilla. Or if you want to be really sweet, then you could get like a vanilla sweetened yogurt. Okay, so then we're gonna bake it at a high temperature. It's 425 for 25 to 30 minutes until caramelized and tender. And you can turn it over once with a fork just to make sure both sides get brown. All right. So yeah, then again, the way that I like to serve it is with a little scoop of yogurt and some granola. So, I'm a big fan of buying things in bulk and using my own containers. So I got this at Berkeley Bowl. I'll also mention I got some of the other things in bulk, like the quinoa, so if you're not sure if you like quinoa or the tri-colored one, it's nice. You can buy exactly the amount you need, especially if you know how big your jar is. This jar I think it was like a spaghetti sauce jar, but it has markings on the side for 1 pint, which is 2 cups. So half a pint is 1 cup. So I bought exactly 2 cups, just what I needed, and it was about $3. So you know, if you're trying any of these things and you only want to buy the amount that you need, it's nice when you can buy it in bulk. Like some of the spices, like allspice, you know, I know I personally don't need a whole container of allspice, so I bought just a little bit and it was, you know, probably 30 cents or something. Okay. So, the last recipe we're gonna do is the salad. Um, the salad is from the New York Times. It had many, many 5-star reviews, so I had to try it. I think I adapted a little bit, but if you're curious to see how they made it, you can check out the website. I think at Berkeley, we all get a free access to New York Times, if you didn't know that. So you can check it out. Okay. So here are some of our key ingredients. We are using radicchio, which is this beautiful dark red color. It's a little bit bitter and it's kind of a nice hearty texture. And a substitution, whoops, that I made was adding some butter lettuce, which I just really like the texture of it. The recipe on the website called for Treviso, which is like, it looks like endive. It might be a type of endive, but it's really, really bitter. So I personally didn't really like it, but if you like the bitterness, then you can try that if you want. Okay. So yeah, you can just use a mix of whatever greens you like. And then to make it kind of special for holiday season or fall, we're gonna add some fruit. So we're gonna add pomegranate and persimmons. And then for the dressing, we're gonna add a little bit of fresh shallot. I'm just gonna make the salad right in this bowl here. But the first thing we're gonna do is make some sugared walnuts. And if you want to skip this step, you could just add, you know, plain walnuts, or you could buy candied walnuts, but it's actually pretty easy to make. It's the only ingredients are sugar and walnuts and a little bit of salt. So we're gonna add half a cup of walnuts to some hot water. And I believe the reason for this is probably to make the nuts a little bit wet on the outside so the sugar can stick, and probably also prevent it from burning in the oven or from getting too crisp inside when the outside is browning with the sugar. Okay, so we're just gonna soak that for about a minute and we'll get everything else ready in the meantime. So I have a big head of butter lettuce here that I'm just gonna kind of cut into smaller pieces. And my preference upon testing this recipe was to have the maybe like 2 parts of a green lettuce to 1 part of the radicchio, because it is kind of a stronger, more bitter flavor. All right, I'm going to set that aside because the recipe actually says to do the persimmons first and to salt them a little bit before we add everything else. So these are persimmons, which are in season in the fall. And make sure I have all my notes on them. Okay, so what's really important for this recipe is to choose Fuyu persimmons, not Hachiya, because they're totally different. These are like kind of crunchy texture. You can eat them raw. The other ones are shaped differently. You see how these are kind of like a squatty shape? The other ones are kind of like longer and usually darker orange. Those have to be really, really ripe when you eat them. Otherwise, they'll totally dry out your mouth and they're really, really bitter. So they're usually like cooked into desserts or eaten when they're almost like so squishy that it just dissolves in your mouth. So look for Fuyu persimmons, which look like this. So they should be a deep, vibrant orange color. If they're pale, they might be underripe. The skin should be glossy, smooth, and free from any bruises, cuts, or black streaks. And they should have a little bit of a give to them. Usually the ones I see at the store are a little bit hard, but a lot of people grow them around here. So I want to show a way to cook that or cook with them that, you know, if if you have a persimmon tree or you have a neighbor with a persimmon tree, you could give that a try. So the walnuts have been soaking. See if I can just fish them out. If I had a sink, I would just pour them into a colander. That's the easier way to do it, but this will work for now. Okay, I got most of them. And then you're gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar and about half a teaspoon of salt. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. You kind of just want enough to coat them. And a little bit of salt. You just want everything coated. And then I ran out of pans, but oops, you're just gonna spread these out on a baking sheet. I would again line it because there's sugar, so that's gonna make it really sticky. And bake it for 7 to 10 minutes until it's crisp, but they will also continue to crisp up once you take them out of the oven. So don't overcook them too much or else they'll get too hard. Okay, so back to the persimmons. So we want to take this part off. You can pop it off with a spoon if you want, but since we're going to cut it up anyway, I like to just cut them in half. And then you can just kind of peel it off by hand. Oops, maybe it's harder with gloves. I don't know. Okay, yeah, you can just kind of pop them off by hand. And then we're gonna slice it up. So, you know, they have like a little bit of a core, but it's pretty soft. But if you get really big ones, it might be a little bit harder. And you can cut out the core if you'd like, but usually it's not really necessary. They might have a black seed in there that you can also pull out if you find them, but most of them don't have a seed. And I like to just cut them into like, I would probably call these 1/4 inch or maybe even a little less, little wedges. I think the recipe said 1/2 inch, but that seems really thick, so I cut them a little bit smaller. And yeah, if you haven't had persimmons, they have a very mild flavor. They're also not very sweet. So they're not the most popular fruit. Probably 'cause they don't really have a really strong flavor, but they're kind of nice in the salad and give it a nice color. Okay, I think I found a seed. I haven't found one of those in a while, so we'll just kind of pull that out for now. Okay. I'm gonna toss these into the bowl. And we're gonna salt them a little bit to give them some flavor. Just a little bit of salt. And set that aside. We can also work on the dressing, which starts with a small shallot. I'm actually using, I would call this like a small to medium shallot, and I used half of it in the first batch and there was plenty. So I'm just gonna use what I'll call half of a small shallot, probably two tablespoons or so once it's minced. And since this is a dressing, we want the pieces to be really small. So I'm gonna kind of cut it horizontally first. And then that way, and then just try to cut it nice and fine. And you can always run the knife over it a little bit extra afterwards to get everything into smaller pieces. Okay, so that's, yeah, maybe about 1.5 tablespoons or 2 tablespoons. All right, pinch of salt. And I skipped the sherry vinegar, so I have I don't know if I put on the handout, but there's other substitutes for sherry vinegar. You can use red wine vinegar, which has a pretty strong flavor, so maybe use a little bit less. You can also use white wine vinegar. seemed to be, when I looked it up, one of the highest recommended substitutes. But I'm gonna use rice vinegar for this. And I'm just gonna replace it 1-to-1. So it says to kind of let the shallot sit in the vinegar before you finish the dressing. So let's go ahead and do that. We need 2 tablespoons. This is actually a 1/8 of a cup, which is the same thing as 2 tablespoons. And we'll just let that sit for a minute while we get everything else ready. Okay, so we have our butter lettuce, we have the radicchio here, which you can see kind of looks like a red cabbage, but not as dense, and it's yeah, again, more bitter. So I don't want huge pieces of it because of that strong flavor and texture, so I'm gonna kind of cut it up into smaller bits. Put that aside. And then the last thing we have to do is get the seeds out of the pomegranate. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. What I did was, this is the full pomegranate. Let's talk about these for a minute. So when you buy them, you want a deep color, and you actually want it to have these kind of flat edges on the side. Can you see that? When it's round, that actually means it's underripe. So you actually want it to look like this and have these flat sides. It should also be heavy for its size. And the color should be bright. So if it's faded and dull, it might be overripe, but at that point. So what I did for this other half is I cut it this way. So basically, you know, this is kind of like the stem or whatever. So I cut it this way. One method I've seen for getting the seeds out is to cut it that way and then hold it and whack it with a wooden spoon. I tried it, it kind of was messy and didn't work that well, and some of the seeds kind of exploded. So it's not my preference. Let me see, need another bowl here. Let's see which one I can use. I'm just gonna pull this out. So what I like to do is just kind of break it up and pull the seeds out, but if you actually do it underwater, it's easier and less messy, which might seem kind of funny. So I'll show you here. What happens is the what do you call the white part? It will just float to the top. That way you can scoop it out more easily. And then because you're breaking it up into water, you don't have the juice shooting out everywhere, because it definitely stains, you know, it'll stain your clothes. It'll leave a mark on your cutting board, which will probably come out eventually, but yeah, just be aware that the beautiful deep red color will get stuck to everything. Okay, so I don't know if you can see on the video, maybe that I'm pulling out most of the white part, but it's just kind of floating to the top. But yeah, you might have your own preferred way of doing it, and that's totally fine. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but this is my current favorite personally. It's a little bit of work. You can also just buy them. If you don't want to deal with this, you can just buy them already popped out of the pomegranate, and that's okay too. Okay. So I think I'm gonna kind of fish them out here. In the middle of the bowl. Yeah, what I would do if I had a sink is I would just kind of pour out the water, knowing that the seeds have sunk to the bottom. And then a lot of the white part will kind of go out with the water. And then once you've gotten most of it out, then you can more carefully drain the rest. I don't know if that made sense. Hard to explain without a sink. Thank you. All right. There you go. So we need, yeah, about half a cup or so. So that looks like about half a cup. So it was half of a maybe medium-sized pomegranate. So this is just kind of my junk water at this point. So we'll just add that. It's not very pretty. We'll cover it up. And then, yeah, we're just gonna toss together the salad. So, you know, if you were baking the walnuts, they should be done by now. But we're gonna skip that and we'll just throw in all of our greens. I am a messy cook, so please excuse the mess. There's never enough room anyway. Okay, there's that. Pomegranate. Oh, and sorry, the last thing that we have to do is finish the dressing. And it's a pretty simple vinaigrette. I'm just gonna eyeball it. We're actually using walnut oil, which has a nice roasted nutty flavor. Which you can skip if you don't want to buy it, and just replace it with like olive oil or another nut oil or something. But I think it does give a really nice taste to the dressing. But yeah, most vinaigrettes are usually 1 part vinegar or some kind of acid to 2, 3, even 4 parts oil. And then there might be an allium like shallot or garlic in there. We use shallot, and then maybe a little salt and whatever other spices you want. But that's kind of a basic vinaigrette. So you can easily make your own dressings by following that formula. And yeah, I would just dress this right before you're going to eat it so it doesn't get soggy. But I thought it might be nice for the fall, for dinner, or as a side with your dinner, or even for the holidays. But you can kind of see how all the colors look. And then, yeah, normally you put the walnuts on top. So I think that's everything. Yes, that is everything. So those are 3 new recipes. Hopefully you'll maybe try at least one of them. But again, check out our website for lots more fall vegetables. And then our final cooking class for the semester will be holiday treats during the first week of December. Also, it is currently the Healthy Holiday Challenge first week, so it's not too late to sign up if you haven't already. And that's gonna go through like mid-December or something. It's an online 6-week challenge. Okay, so we're gonna finish off with our raffle. We have